Jeffrey mocks other martial arts. I mean, why wouldn't he? His martial art is so great. A martial art needs to be effective, and surely there was nothing to learn from all these other martial arts. So Jeffrey mocks them. Adonis. Adonis has gotten to the very top of his martial art, but he doesn't stop there. He looks to other sources, to other martial arts, and learns from them. He humbles himself before masters of other disciplines, and he takes in their wisdom. And once he has taken in all he can, he goes back to his martial art and integrates what he has learned. But he doesn't stop there. Adonis sees other people working on their martial arts journeys, and he encourages them. He's proud of their progress and encourages them to keep going.
For as long as there have been societies, there's been generational differences. Old money versus new money, what was versus what is. Martial arts is no stranger to this, with traditional martial arts versus modern martial arts. A debate that has certainly raged its fair over the years. From debates to matchups to a few jokes or two. But where does this whole debate come from? Where was the start of this whole divide, and where is it going to move forwards? Because if we cannot at least break bread with each other, could we at least remain neutral? Let's find out today. One of the first factors to consider when looking at martial arts and how it has evolved is not necessarily the martial arts itself, but at politics. We're already getting controversial. For a long time in Asian countries, martial arts were seen as exactly what they say on the tin. It was about martial warfare, which is basically just saying war for warfare. It was about being the most effective in their own unique ways. Learning to use a sword, a spear, a shield, a dagger, bow and arrow. Martial arts had its purpose, but beyond that it also had the purpose of spiritual enlightenment, most especially in places such as the Shaolin Temple, or at centers of Zen Buddhism where they went more into Tai Chi, where martial arts was used not just as a form of defense or as a form of warfare, it was used as a form of spiritual experience. But as war goes on over history, it also evolves with technology. And so at a certain point, punches and kicks kind of went out of fashion on the battlefield, and especially after World War II. Which is also where a lot of countries, such as America, were first exposed to Eastern martial arts. And this is where we see American-style dojos spread their wings. As after World War II, people still wanted that communal spirit, that wartime spirit of brotherhood and of being together. They had gone through a shared experience which, coming home, no one else had experienced. And not only that, they had these newfound skills which they found didn't really find a use in society. So what do? They open up a school and they organise these things among themselves. And because it was linked to such an event as World War II, it became very personal, the practice of martial arts. And maybe even became linked to the world before warfare, before the world wars even happened, which is where there was much more of the stringent ties to tradition. You see, in the wake of a post-World War II world, it was one thing to stick to tradition, to stick to the old world. That is certainly one route to go down. But there's the other route as well of continuing to move forward, of facing the reality that this is a new world and we have to live in it. We have to move forward. And so there came the push for, well, finding more effective ways to fight. If not for actual combat, at least for sparring. And it's become to the point where we have 3 new camps of martial practice. Where first we have traditional martial arts, the ones which place tradition over effectiveness. These are martial arts which may still involve sparring, may still involve combat activities, but they'll place the tradition and place more of the original intent of techniques over the moving forward. These will be the various branches of karate, kung fu, aikido, and then there comes modern martial arts. I'm making a distinction here because there's 2 forms of modern martial arts. I'll get into the second one later. But first of all, there's modern martial arts. Now these can be martial arts or combat sports which have traditional roots. They have history, but they keep in touch with the contemporary by continually pressure testing, by continually wiping away the old and making room for the new. You know that the people who are at the top of their game in these respective martial arts are the absolute peak. They are the most effective in what they do. So these would include things like boxing, BJJ, Muay Thai, martial arts that may have an older background but still keep up to date with the new. And then we come to the third one, postmodern martial arts. And this is basically just MMA, where instead of it being a specific system of martial arts, it is instead sort of a melting pot for varieties of martial arts. The idea is, it's just what works, works. If someone in the UFC walked into the octagon and said that they were going to win by clucking like a chicken, and they did it, you would hear the local gym become a lot more like KFC.
He's out of line, but he's right.
So we now have these three camps, and let's be honest here, divides between these camps is quite often quite different. Now don't get me wrong, postmodern, in MMA you'll find people that have practiced traditional martial arts, but what you'll often find is that either people will say that they have to practice something more modern in order to keep touch, in order to keep base, or they'll say that the traditional martial arts is useless and they need to move on to something else completely. The idea is always that the traditional martial arts is a hampering to their martial ability. At least that's the perspective that people are always told when they practice traditional martial arts and go into that postmodern environment. Whereas modern martial arts, they'll just say that traditional martial arts is crap and you shouldn't practice it at all and should only practice modern or postmodern. Everyone always seems to dunk on traditional.
Everybody hates me!
Don't be silly, not everyone's met you.
Taekwondo is an interesting outlier because it is characterized as a traditional martial art because it maintains tradition over pressure testing, over pushing boundaries within its martial arts. So it stays in that traditional mindset, but it stays in that traditional categorizing, but it has the mindset of a modern martial art, because you will often see Taekwondo practitioners, teachers, etc. pushing against other traditional martial arts like karate or kung fu, and then everyone just dumps on Aikido. Taekwondo is especially an interesting outlier because there are people that practice Taekwondo at an Olympic level, which is interesting. Because you would think if Taekwondo was practiced at an Olympic level, it would be more of a modern or postmodern martial art, one that did push its boundaries, but no, it's much more specialised. You don't really see Taekwondo practitioners doing boxing combinations to add to their power. They tend to keep to what they do best. I might even start to say that Taekwondo is its own category in its own right. It's just, what are you? But that's when we come to the next factor here, effectiveness. And this seems to where the big divide comes from in terms of martial arts. That always seems to be the idea, at least, that traditional martial arts, not effective at all, so they have their own, everyone dunks on them. Modern martial arts, they can be effective, but they're a bit too specialised on their own to truly be truly effective. Postmodern martial arts is brilliant and everyone should do it. That seems to be the perspective. But if effectiveness was the only category by which martial arts was allowed to survive and thrive, then we wouldn't have half of the martial arts that we have existing today. I mean, capoeira wouldn't be called effective by any means, and yet its beauty and its history and its culture has allowed it to survive and thrive into the modern day for good reason, the same being for Tai Chi. This is where you see debate on martial arts such as Krav Maga, because the idea is meant to be that Krav Maga was built for the military. It was built, again, for that combat purpose, but so was every martial art. I mean, join the club. The idea that the Krav Maga has any sort of special significance is laughable, especially when you consider how even today, or even when Krav Maga was invented, Krav Maga has to go up against a gun. If they mean more effective in terms of a self-defense situation, certainly any martial art can teach you any sorts of moves. I mean, there's over 180 martial arts out there, but everywhere you go, a punch is a punch. If every martial art teaches you how to throw a punch, every martial art is effective. But not every martial art can teach you that fight or flight, that immediate instinctual knowing of what to do when you get attacked by someone completely random out of the blue. No martial art can truly teach you that. So by those metrics then, how do we define effectiveness? MMA teaches effectiveness by going straight to the point, less faff and more of just the useful points from each martial art, all voltron together into their own conglomeration. But then by that same token, you lose out on the philosophy and the unspoken lessons that come with those techniques. Sand the floor doesn't really have as much of a ring to it if you don't actually sand the floor and put in the hard work to learn that technique. If you're just going, just do that. And within that, we need to question, therefore, what we consider as effective. Because certainly we can say that there's the one camp of effectiveness being defined through competition and pressure testing, but there's the other camp of effectiveness being in terms of just how we live our lives day to day, more of the stoic approach. And in that context, then martial arts such as Tai Chi come back into the forefront. And unlike something like MMA, which takes out that philosophy and perhaps more of the spiritual edge to make way for more of a scientific bent to martial arts, Tai Chi is not really based in most effective in terms of physical combat and more about that spirituality and philosophy. That's where it just lives. And so if you define something as effective by those parameters, well then certainly it looks very effective, honestly. But what about those parts of martial arts which perhaps could be effective but are just repressed? Like, for example, China. This is a branch of Chinese martial arts which largely is not practiced that much anymore due to the bend that Chinese martial arts has taken over the years. As it's become more about performance and demonstration, things such as sparring, things such as Chin-ar, things which could more obviously impact the body in a negative way have been sort of pushed to the side, not practicing much. And so Chin-ar, which is about pins, locks, grapples, things which are more effective, they've been pushed away and largely repressed. And so by that, it leaves the overall image of Chinese martial arts as being not very effective. And so, to anyone that doesn't know about these things and just sees the performance and the demonstration side, yeah, it doesn't look very effective.
Round one.
Which is where we really get on to another big factor in terms of the differences here. Media influence. First, looking back at modern and postmodern, you'll have things like boxing, Muay Thai, MMA, Taekwondo, which is more traditional, but for our purposes now, we'll rank it with the others. So these martial arts are defined by the Olympics, by UFC, by boxing matches, by competition, by matches, and so by that it gives it more of a bend of legitimacy. You have a clearly defined goal. You have a winner, you have a loser. You can see what works and what doesn't. You know that these people have trained themselves to their absolute limits, trained their technique to their very best. You know this because you can see it. Whereas more traditional martial arts, like karate, like kung fu, they're seen more, if not in their own competitions, where it's like point sparring, for example, or demonstrations, then you'll have them only in film and television, which has that bend of, it's choreographed, it's not real, you couldn't actually have that happen. And especially in things such as wuxia productions, which deal in magic. So then you go, oh, well, the martial arts, in that can't actually happen in real life, it looks too theatrical, nah, it can't possibly be real. Even with that, you will still have martial arts that, even if they are traditional and not seen as very effective, you'll see them trend upwards once again, with media influence. I mean, just look at what happened with the Ip Man franchise. As soon as that came out in 2008, everyone wanted to learn Wing Chun. Or look at in the 80s, or now. Cobra Kai, Karate Kid, while those were out, everyone wanted to learn karate, especially in America. It's through storytelling that we are inspired in our own stories of our lives. And so if we see someone and we identify with someone who takes on these certain traits or do these certain things, and we want to be more like them, we do these certain things. So if you want to be more like Daniel LaRusso, you'll go and practice karate. You want to be more like Ip Man? Wing Chun. And so we see so far a divide that exists, not just due to reputation through media influence, but also through its goals and aims. while more traditional martial arts have the reputations based in legends, in film, in fiction, so they look more fantastical. But they still inspire people to practice them, and they have more of a influence with spirituality, and with more of the internal side, where it comes with traditionalism. More modern martial arts and postmodern martial arts, you'll see them have more of a reputation based in competition, in the Olympics, in UFC, in boxing matches, and more of a basis in science, in what is analytical, graphical, what can be tested and pressured, and made to be more effective over time. But now I want to come to this string of the debate, which I heard about a while ago. It's from this one YouTuber named Ramsey Dewey. Now, I will say off the bat, check him out. He is a very, very knowledgeable chap. Very chill videos. He really knows his stuff. Talks more in MMA terms, but still really good. So I would say check him out when you can. But the point I saw him bring up was the idea of traditional martial arts being more like a dead language, like Latin, or like linear inscription. You can study these ancient languages and get more of an understanding, more of a context of how our modern languages were developed. It's useful in that way. And can even be used to create something new, a new language, like what Tolkien did when he was writing his books. You can do that, but it's more effective today to learn a newer language like French, like Italian, like Spanish. That's his idea. And I see why he's making this point, because language is a segment of culture much like martial arts. These two are very much symptoms of the culture they stem from. While he's right in that sort of assessment, I don't think he's quite correct in this more linear idea that he's presenting. Because once a dead language is a dead language, that's it. Really. We don't see people suddenly... We don't see whole countries suddenly learning Latin again. Doesn't happen. Whereas martial arts, as we've already mentioned, martial arts goes through trends. So while at the moment people are trekking more towards learning MMA, or learning more modern martial arts, there is also that upward tick of people learning more traditional martial arts, such as karate, while Cobra Kai is on the air. And a few years ago it was Wing Chun. And as Ramsey says, you can take a traditional martial art, retool it to fit into the more modern parameters. So that doesn't really mean that the martial art itself, the core traditional martial art, is ineffective. It just means it needs to be updated a little bit. It just needs to be retooled in order to fit a modern slant. And so in these three camps, that is where we lie. We have the traditional martial arts, which deals more in spirituality, in the internal that comes with tradition. We have modern martial arts, which has traditional roots, but still remains effective. And then we have postmodern, which does pretty much just whatever it needs to in order to work. So as we've seen it go on, it's become more and more relying on the physical, on the scientific, which is sort of emblematic of post-Enlightenment society, really. So, but by the time we reach this point of postmodern martial arts, where does the spirituality factor back in? Where does the philosophy factor back in? Okay, people still practice spiritual practice on a personal level, but martial arts has done so much historically in terms of philosophy. I mean, think of how many philosophers go back to martial arts, to some form of combat sport as a reference point and say, if you do this at least once a week, you'll be happier. But how many martial artists have gone into philosophy throughout history? Perhaps it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater to throw the philosophy and the spirituality out of the less effective martial arts. And so while certainly postmodern martial arts are good at what they do, does that necessarily equate to them being good for everything? Because certainly someone that does MMA, someone that does more modern martial arts, they're good for what they do, but how does that help people in everyday life? How does that help people become more spiritually whole? It can on a personal level, but if people are left up the creek without a paddle in this whole system, is it really working? So I would say perhaps we need to go back more to the middle of the modern martial arts and say, hold on a minute. perhaps we're going a bit too far too quickly. And I think even traditional martial arts needs to take a minute and say, where are we in history? Do we need to move forwards? Make no mistake, I'm someone that practices traditional martial arts as well, and I don't want the spiritual sides, the traditional sides of martial arts to be lost completely if we have to move forwards, taking out the less effective techniques. I don't want to throw the tradition out as well, because that's a big part of traditional martial arts. But let's be honest here, even ones like Kung Fu are a joke. In large swaths of Chinese martial arts are just not effective, laughable when compared to even the lowest ranks of the UFC. And that is a shame, because when you consider how the spiritual sides of martial arts, MMA, the postmodern, functions a lot like ancient Chinese martial arts used to, exploring knowledge, trying to learn more, going out into the world and learning new techniques, and being experimental. That was what Chinese martial arts, like the Shaolin Temple, that's what they used to do. It was less a system and more a lifestyle. So UFC functions a lot, or MMA functions a lot more like ancient Kung Fu used to. Funny that. So what these two need to do really is meet in the middle. We need to maintain the traditions of the past, certainly, but we need to have an eye on the future as well. Be willing to evolve and move forwards. Not allow ourselves to become succumbed to quicksand and sink. Because Kung Fu has been around since at least the 6th century AD, and I don't know about you, but I don't want it to die out anytime soon. But to do that, it needs to be willing to evolve. So, good first step for that would be include sparring once again. Rely less on demonstration and performance. So do I think that this whole divide needs to exist between modern, postmodern and traditional? Not in that order. No. Because there is still something to learn from all of these. From all of these different sectors of martial arts, there's still something to learn. But we need to be willing and humble enough to learn from each other, not to divide up and start going into the trenches. If we're willing to meet in the middle, if we're willing to break bread with each other and be willing to learn from each other, that is great, because it means that everyone can move forwards equally. But if we start just trying to lob insults at each other, or say that something is ineffective and needs to be left into the past, then that's just not going to help anyone. But what do you think? Let us know down in the comments down below. And until next time, thank you all for watching, and peace be with you.